Imagine, for a moment, the cloud-draped mountains of Yunnan province, southwest China. It's June 1855. A lone hunter is crouched over a freshly killed Himalayan marmot. With a practiced flick of his knife, he slices the pelt free. He's completely unaware that in that exact moment, a single flea has leaped from the animal's fur onto his wrist. 3 nights later, he's consumed by fever. His groin and armpits are swollen with black, apple-sized lumps that seem to pulse with a life of their own. He dies before the sun rises. Within weeks, his entire village is gone. There were no trumpets, no marching armies, yet the deadliest and longest plague pandemic in modern history, the only one that has never truly ended, had just begun. This wasn't just a local tragedy. This was the spark. Over the next century, this plague would circle the entire globe on steamships and railways. It would kill at least 15 million people and seed reservoirs of the plague bacterium, Yersinia pestis, that still awaken and take lives today. In fact, according to the World Health Organization's those 1024 plague, every single human case reported in the last 5 years can trace its ancestry directly back to that nameless hunter and that single infected flea. The bacterium itself is an ancient terror. It's the same biological killer that rode with Genghis Khan's armies, the same one that burned through Constantinople, the same one that murdered half of Europe in 1347, known to history as the Black Death. But this time, it had new, terrifyingly efficient accomplices: the British Empire's vast shipping network, and the unstoppable power of the Age of Steam. From the remote mountain valleys of Yunnan, the infection followed the mule caravans down the Pearl River, reaching the bustling ports of Canton and, eventually, Hong Kong. For 40 years it simmered quietly, flaring up in scattered villages, killing dozens here, hundreds there, but remaining largely unnoticed by the wider world. Then, in the spring of 1894, it exploded. The fuse that had been burning for decades finally reached the powder keg, the crowded, squalid tenements of Hong Kong's Taiping Shan district. The results were catastrophic. Within weeks, 90% of those infected were dead. Bodies were stacked like cordwood in the streets, while British colonial troops, desperate to contain the panic, burned entire neighborhoods to the ground. The crisis sparked a frantic scientific race. To microbiologists, Alexander Yersin from France and Shibasaburo Kitazato from Japan rushed to Hong Kong. Working in makeshift laboratories, they both independently isolated the same rod-shaped killer bacterium from the ruptured boils of the dead and dying. In the end, Yersin won the naming rights, and the ancient killer was christened Yersinia pestis. From Hong Kong, the pandemic spread across the oceans faster than any plague in history. Steamships of every flag, unknowingly carrying infected rats and their fleas in their cargo holds, became vectors of death. Within just a few months, they delivered the plague to every major port on Earth. Bombay, now Mumbai, was struck in August 1896. The impact was devastating. Over the next 30 years, that city alone would lose more than 500,000 souls to the disease. By the year 1900, the plague had a global footprint, with outbreaks confirmed in San Francisco, Sydney, Cape Town, Buenos Aires, Glasgow, and Honolulu. A comprehensive study published in The Lancet in 2021 estimates that this third pandemic caused at least 15 million confirmed deaths. But the true toll is likely double that when you consider all the unrecorded cases in remote, rural areas. The symptoms remained as medieval in their brutality as they were in the 14th century. There were 3 main forms. The bubonic form brought fever, chills, and the grotesquely swollen lymph nodes, the buboes, that gave the disease its infamous name. Then there was the septicemic form, where the bacteria invaded the bloodstream directly, turning it toxic. The skin of its victims would blacken as their tissues died. Death was almost certain, arriving within hours. But the most terrifying was the pneumonic form. It became airborne, spreading from person to person through coughs and sneezes. Without modern antibiotics, it was 100% fatal. Victims would cough up blood until they essentially drowned in their own fluids. In India, the scale of the tragedy is hard to comprehend. Between 1896 and 1930, 12 million people died. That's an average of 1 death every 2 minutes for 34 straight years. Mass graves, the size of small towns, were dug outside major cities like Bombay, Calcutta, and Karachi. The response from the ruling British Raj was severe: forced house burnings, compulsory committals to plague hospitals, and strict quarantines cordons guarded by soldiers with fixed bayonets. The pandemic finally reached American soil in 1900. It arrived aboard the steamship Australia, which docked in San Francisco with infected rats hiding in its hold. The city's Chinatown was immediately and brutally quarantined. Houses were burned, and residents were forcibly evacuated. In an effort to protect trade and tourism, California's governor went so far as to publicly deny that the plague even existed in his state. This official cover-up lasted 4 years, allowing the disease to spread unchecked, costing thousands of lives. But the most enduring consequence of this denial was what happened next. According to CDC records, this outbreak established a permanent reservoir of the plague in the wild animal populations of the American West. Ground squirrels, prairie dogs, and other rodents became the new hosts, and this reservoir is still active today, producing human plague cases almost every single year between 1900 and today. More than 1,000 confirmed plague infections have occurred in the United States, almost all of them descended from that original introduction in San Francisco. So you see, the third pandemic never truly ended. After 1960, global case numbers dropped, and the plague seemed to retreat from the world's cities. But it didn't disappear. It went into hiding, deep within those animal reservoirs, where it continues to flare up unexpectedly. Madagascar still records hundreds of cases annually. A major outbreak there in 2017 killed 200 people in just 3 months. The Democratic Republic of Congo, Mongolia, and Peru all have active plague hotspots. The WHO's 2024 report states that between 2010 and 2023, there were over 6,000 human cases worldwide, with a 15% fatality rate, even with modern medicine. And there's a new, frightening development: antibiotic resistance. In 1995, a strain resistant to 8 different drugs was isolated in Madagascar. This is why the CDC lists plague as a Category A bioterror agent. They know that a single, intentional aerosol release could potentially restart a global pandemic tomorrow. It's a chilling thought. It all goes back to that one hunter, in that one moment, in 1855 na. Single flea, a single life, was all it took to unleash a plague that has outlived empires, adapted to the modern world, and still waits patiently in the wild for its next chance. Thank you for watching. If you found this story as fascinating and sobering as I did, please consider subscribing for more deep dives into the history that still shapes our world today.